Welcome to the Religious Treehouse. I'm Matthew.
And I'm Jodie.
Jody, what are you up to today?
Well, I just found out an anime I watched does not have a second season and it's not getting a prequel movie. So I'm not doing well at
Yeah,
all.
no, that's
How are you?
understandable. I I'm not really watching any TV right now, so I don't have any updates on the TV shows. So that's sad, I guess. My update is I don't have any updates. Tragic.
So
Um,
tragic.
but yeah, I'm
Wait,
excited for our talk today. What?
you've been working a lot though, haven't you?
I have been working a lot, so I've been busy.
Yeah. Working hard?
Working hard or hardly working, one or the
Yeah.
other. I don't know why I just turned into like a 70-year-old man. I turned into my grandpa right there. Whatever. Let's go. Let's get into this. Today we are talking about a parable of Jesus. We're diving into the New Testament. I feel like we haven't been in the New Testament in a while, but also I feel like my concept of time is just off right now, and we could have talked about it last week for all I know. But we're talking about a Jesus parable.
Yeah. We kind of touched on the New Testament with Jesus camp, but yes, we are discussing parables. Our last parable was of the mustard seed.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Good talk. You should go listen to that episode. It's very memorable. I remember it all. Um,
And today we're talking about the laborers in the vineyard, Matthew 20, 1 through 16.
yeah. Oh, as always, we're relying on Amy Jo Levine's work, Short Stories by Jesus. Um, that's a great resource if y'all are interested in this conversation. Check that out. Um, but yeah, let's get started. Jody, do you want to give us a summary of what's going on?
Okay, and we're reading from NRSVUE. That's what we do here. So basically, what happens is this dude hires some laborers and he's like, I'll give you a denarius. I think that's how you say that. And he sends them out to the vineyard. And then multiple times throughout the day, he keeps collecting laborers and sending them into the vineyards. At the end of the day, he goes to pay everyone and he pays everyone the exact same and justifies it by saying, I can do what I want with my money because it's mine. And I don't need to pay people fairly for the amount of work because people have done varying amounts of work in the vineyard. So,
All right, so that was a very commentary filled summary. So let's get into it and see how much of that was in the story and how much of that is commentary. I'm excited for this conversation. But yeah, basically manager of a vineyard is like, hey, we need workers, hires a bunch of workers at various points throughout the day, has his manager pay them all the same at the end, and we're done. But
oh,
yeah,
you make it
first
sound so simple. It needs the commentary.
first things first, I would think we should talk about the name of this. This is well, and we've talked about this, I'm sure, at some point, how much I hate how these things are named. Like if you read a study Bible, or most Bibles nowadays, not all, but most Bibles have like titles of like different sections and stuff. Um, so that's an addition to the text. That's not part of the Bible. And the problem with this, I think, is that it adds unnecessary commentary to the text. It highlights aspects and it de-emphasizes other aspects by choosing how to title these texts. If we kind of read the story as it is, we could get things differently than what we might if we are, looking at these titles. So the title of this, which is commonly called the laborers in the vineyard, expect us to kind of focus on the laborers in the vineyard, despite the fact that the householder is a primary character, that the manager is a primary character, that it occurs in various locations in the marketplace and the vineyard. By emphasizing those two things, it um, you know has a focus that isn't necessarily uh, needed. I don't think it could just as easily be named, the parable of the complaining day laborer or the parable of the surprising salaries or something like that. So choosing how we talk about this, how we are aware of how this is presented, I think is important for the conversation, for understanding how we perceive this.
That was so nice. I would have said the parable of this screwing over capitalist.
Yeah, there's a handful of so Levine proposes a handful of uh, um, variations of the title, some better than others. what does she have here? Robert Fortna proposes, which is anachronistic and a bit mistaken, the humane capitalist, the conscientious boss is and one that Levine proposes. The last hired are first paid, or how to prevent peasants from unionizing. So there's a lot of options here of to what to name this section, but how we choose to talk about this, I think, is important in framing the conversation.
Yeah.
So, because this is how it's called, the laborers of the vineyard, we'll talk about this as the laborers in the vineyard, despite the fact that there's no like official name to this. Nor is there any like official name to like any of the parables we've talked about or any of the biblical stories we've talked about. We're all just talking to make things make sense to us.
Well, yeah, because it's not like Jesus was there and he's like, this one is titled
Yeah.
blank. The parables were more like he's just speaking with people and he's like, well, what about in this situation? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So in this situation, people are being hired to work in vineyards.
Yeah. So, and this is in the context of like Jesus is in Jerusalem. He's teaching people, saying parables, performing a miracle or two. There's nothing. I mean, the context is obviously important, but for the sake of our conversation, what's going around outside these verses aren't too impactful or relevant, I don't think.
Well, I
Uh,
mean, where there was money issues, right? Like with the Roman Empire and taxes and
yeah, I'm talking about
oh,
textually,
okay.
like the verses preceding and after this.
You're good. Sorry, my bad.
Yeah, but no, like the idea of there being like and we'll talk about this later. Some interpreters see this as like, oh, there's a large scale famine. That's why there's so many workers trying to get work. Um, like Jesus for sure is on the side of the poor and powerless and stuff like that. But I don't think the idea of there being a widespread famine or there being, homelessness everywhere, widespread, was a huge, huge, huge problem. Um, as it might get blown up to be
Yeah.
elsewhere. But like poor people and poverty, definitely a problem, but widespread famine and stuff, not so much, most likely.
Okay. So let's crack on into this.
Yeah, first, I think we should talk about some harmful readings, harmful interpretations of the story, or how it's been. Not all of them are harmful, but some of them are harmful interpretations. Some of them are just, maybe not the best readings. And then we can kind of go through the story kind of slowly and maybe present a reading at the end of like what early Jews would have heard that Jesus was talking to here.
Okay.
So there's kind of three main readings that this has had throughout history. First one starting with like the church fathers, with Origin and other patristic figures, is that there's the five workers, the five sets of workers um, that work at 6, 9, 12, 3, or 5.
Mm.
And he says that these are kind of representative of biblical figures. So it starts with Adam, Noah, Abraham, Moses, and then finally we get to Jesus being the fifth worker there. Um, and the problem with this is that it often, as presented by these church fathers, it often presents this view of supersessionism. Um, and it's just indicating the progression of salvation history, kind of starting with like the lawless Eden, where Adam and Eve kind of do their own things without law and order, and then it slowly moves through the Mosaic Law to the Gospels and Jesus's new law and stuff like that, where it kind of supersedes Judaism, which is very problematic. So that's not super common in modern views, but historically that one has taken precedent to some extent.
Okay. That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's an interesting thought. That I don't know if that's a stretch, but it's an interesting interpretation.
Yeah, I
Like,
mean it's I don't see much basis for it, um, like textually at all. And given the supersessionist problems with it, like it's definitely not a good interpretation.
yeah, no. Okay, what else?
Oh, more modernly and it's more commonly, we often get, you know, people put in places of these groups of like, hey, this group is, person number one, this group is person number five, whatever. And often Jews are commonly put in the place of the first workers who are grumbling and complaining by the end of the story. Um, they they see this interpretation kind of sees God giving grace to sinners and the undeserving. The later people in this are going to be tax collectors and fishermen and stuff like that, where this parable is seen as a lesson of legalism versus grace, where the people who got there first, often, Pharisaic Jews of some sort in these interpretations, um, is they're looking at a very legalistic understanding of life, and then as they move on to the other workers, there's more grace and stuff like that happening, which again, very problematic. um and then you get variants of this view, like John Wesley, who's a prominent theologian from like the 1700s. He founded things like Methodism. He proposes that this represents like the first group of people who get hired are Jews who rejected Gentile entry into Jesus, and showing that like many Jews would be rejected, but many Gentiles would come to be accepted, and that's what Jesus was trying to explain there. That the worker, the landowner, starts with the Jews who are following Jesus, but then welcomes in Gentiles, and Gentiles, opening this up to Gentiles following Jesus, and saying, pushing Judaism away.
Again, interesting.
Problematic. But and then there's some variations on that as well, which are a little better, I'd say, where they identify the first hired again as Pharisees, um, but they kind of look at their own cultural landscape in modern times, and look at fellow Christians who reject multiculturalism, where the second followed are African Americans, the next are Asian Americans, Hispanic, Native Americans, bringing in different groups to the fold. This is, kind of God welcoming in all the different people of all the ethnicities into the fold, which is a beautiful, cool message. But it also presumes that each group is a different ethnic group, and it starts with like, and it also promotes ethnic or racial equality. All good things, but it also
Yeah.
kind of starts with the message of Jewish xenophobia, who start with, are the grumbling complainers that, do bad things and aren't appreciative and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So that kind of overview has, anti-Semitic overtones to it, and has been used in bad ways, but can also be used in, a little better way here or there.
Yeah. Does it have to be about specific groups?
It doesn't have to be, but this is what people have decided. This is how largely people have interpreted this allegorically, saying these five groups of people that are brought into the fold, that are brought into the vineyard, um, are, representative of some either group at that time or modern group. And I don't think that's a helpful interpretation.
I don't
uh,
think so. I think that's a tad divisive and like
yeah,
puts priority kind of. And I I don't know. The key part to this for me is for the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early. Like it's just like
yeah,
kingdom of heaven, like no matter when you enter, everyone gets the same.
yeah. Well, yeah, and part of this is that it's using language of a vineyard and a landowner, which
Mm.
is sometimes correlated with God and the heaven and God's kingdom and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So if you see Jesus talking about a parable with a landowner and a vineyard, it's not a bad idea to correlate. Okay, this landowner might represent God, and this vineyard is God's kingdom.
Yeah.
That's a common occurrence biblically. Like it happens a handful of times in I want to say Isaiah and Jeremiah. And that's not to say this is the only way that this should be read, and I don't, and it certainly shouldn't be the only way that this is read. But I do believe that is part of this. Part of this is going to be some allegorical type thing where God is, the wealthy landowner, and the vineyard is Israel in this situation.
Okay.
Um, but if we reduce it only to this allegorical, heavenly type situation, I think that also misses a lot of the point. I think a lot of this is also economic commentary,
Mm.
but we'll talk about that later.
Okay.
We'll go through a few more understandings of how this has been interpreted.
Got it.
Um, the third one that is that this is a way to defend Jesus's association with like tax collectors and sinners and stuff like that. The workers after the first group are generally seen as job-seeking Romans or thieves or murderers or bad people, and this is a way for Jesus to justify hanging out with those people because all are welcomed into the kingdom of God eventually. Um, but regardless of the bad interpretation, usually involves Jews as the negative foil, Jews as being the stumbling block, the bad group, and then the last hired are the ones that either the Jews would have rejected or Gentiles that are being welcomed in by God.
These are some, I gotta be honest, a little wacky for me. A little wacky to keep putting Jews in a not so great place when Jesus himself was one.
Yeah. Well, we should do like an episode at some point on just like anti-Semitism and like how it has occurred throughout like historic interpretation. Um, like there's a lot to say there and a lot that should be said. But no, definitely with 2000 years of interpretation, a lot of people have anti-Semitic views that get imported into these texts, whether purposefully or on accident.
Like,
Uh,
I just don't think Jesus would appreciate you putting anti-Semitic views on his words. It seems a little wacky decky, guys.
yeah, yeah. Um, but yeah, so the main thing is that these views kind of have Jews as the negative foil, and it's also this very allegorical reading that allow the interpreters to kind of step back away from the economic messages that are happening there.
Mhm.
So it's a way to kind of step around.
All right.
Another way to look at this, which is different, I think not as, you know, clearly harmful, clearly anti-Jewish, is kind of looking at this more as the land order being, you know, exploitative, often exploitative Jewish elite, robbing peasants and demanding huge tithes to the temple and keeping the poor poor. Um, which,
And yet more anti-Semitism makes it in.
yeah, right, right. But like this interpretation, that generally is the end of the anti-Semitism. You have, kind of two strains that are like, that's anti-Semitic, but then others that are like, no, just the exploitative elite. Like whether they're Jewish or not, just the exploitative elite. A bit more socialist, I suppose, would be this interpretation.
Okay,
Which,
I can get down with that.
well, but they see this again as the last to be hired as kind of being outcast and expendables, and this is Jesus speaking up on their behalf. And Jesus is trying to help the workers realize that um, that the householder is kind of exploiting their work, and everyone is getting the same amount. And this is the landowner kind of sowing discord. Because if you show up at 6 a.m. and you do work for 12 hours, or if you show up at 5 p.m. and you do work for 1 hour, and you all get the paid, or you all get paid the same, there's going to be some discord among the workers, as
Yep.
we see in this story.
Yep.
And that is Jesus, according to this interpretation, that is Jesus saying, the landowner is seeing this and is making sure that they don't unionize because they're sowing discord within the works of the workers. This is not how a first century Jewish audience would have seen this.
Nope.
This is a very modern interpretation and
Yep.
uh, surely a leftist interpretation
It
that
it would be a reflection of the current events people are experiencing, it seems.
Sure, sure. Definitely, there's some leftist commentary in here that would very much agree with this interpretation.
Yeah.
However, as noble as that may be for some, I don't think this is accurate in thinking of how a first century Jewish audience would imagine this.
No. No. I think they would have been disgruntled, but they would have still been like, no, we should just get paid for how much labor we did.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So I think those kind of faulty interpretations we should acknowledge and like they're there, and we should also kind of see how we can move through them. So maybe we can go through the story a little slowly now and talk about how exploitative landlords and extreme poverty and stuff like that isn't necessarily what this is about, but maybe something closer to, loving your neighbor.
Okay, let's get into it.
Of
Would you like me to
course.
read?
Um, yeah, I mean, we don't really need to read it. We can just kind of summarize each section
Okay.
at a time. So the first two verses is just kind of the introduction here. We have the landowner, the householder, uh, is going out to hire laborers in the vineyard, and he agrees with the laborers for a denarius for the day, and he sent them into his vineyard. Translation choices here. Landowner, I think, is a fine translation. Householder may be a little bit more accurate. Is generally like how this word is translated throughout um the New Testament is more so householder, owner of the house, stuff like that. I should note I'm no Greek expert here. I'm relying on the work of other scholars here. So, thinking of this as a householder type situation could be a little better. The translation of landowner could be more helpful in associating this with God, whereas
Mm,
householder may not associate this with God. And as I mentioned, having this character be the God figure can and should probably be part of this interpretation, but shouldn't be the exclusive entire interpretation.
okay.
Or at least I don't think that's how it was intended.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, the householder goes out at 6. Some commentaries you'll see nowadays are like, that's odd. That's a little early to go out. That's not odd. That's normal. Um,
We used to rise with the sun, people.
Yeah, and,
My
and
goodness.
there's a lot of like rabbinic literature that's like very explicitly like get started early in the morning. We talked about this in our Akedah episode, Binding of Isaac, where Abraham was just so excited to get up super early in the morning to go sacrifice his son. So yeah, the idea of waking up early to get work done or to hire people isn't necessarily odd.
Not at
Uh,
all.
But yeah, the denarius for a day as the daily wage would probably be enough food for like 3 to 6 days for a person, or like a medium to large family, enough food for like a day. So it's not like exorbitant. It's not like a crazy amount of money that they're getting, but it's, a fair payment
Yeah.
ish. Um, and it also followed, the customs of the time. This is a fair wage that was generally agreed for the people in this time period and area. So nothing here is abnormal yet. We're just kind of chatting it up, starting the
Yeah.
story. And as we've learned from our other parable episodes, we usually look for something weird to happen. Something weird is going to happen. We're just not there yet. So then we go
Okay.
to verses 3 and 4.
So nine
Verses three or
o'clock.
four, yeah, 9 o'clock happens. It gets a little weird here. The owner, or the homeowner, um, landlord, whatever we want to call him, the homeowner, uh, goes back to the market at 9. People are there without work, and so he brings a new group. No, there's no discussion on the agreement on price. This is, um, they seem to kind of have it in mind already. It's unlikely that he's taking advantage of an unemployed workforce here. Up until this point, we see there's nothing wrong with this guy. We have no reason not to trust this householder. He's just like, presumably trustworthy, and we should take him at his word that what he's doing is right. So
I
again,
guess.
nothing too weird happening here other than the fact that he came back for other workers, which like, okay, I guess he needed more work because he misgauged. But then we get to verses, 5 through 7, which is a little odd, a little more odd, because he goes back out again for more workers at 11 o'clock. And managers generally know how much labor they need for the day. They generally have, an idea of like what they're expecting. So I think this allows for a few possibilities. Like either the householder had no idea how much work he needed, which seems odd. Um, he's hired everyone available at the marketplace, but it's still insufficient. So he goes back to get more, which I guess possible. Or he has another agenda, which is more likely given the nature of this parable. Nothing about this parable indicates that he like needs more labor or anything like that. So it's unclear what's going on here. And also the householder asks like why some weren't hired, and a lot of commentators will say it's because they're elderly or they're injured. That's why they weren't hired first. They're not as capable as the earlier ones. But their answer to like why they weren't working isn't because that they were unable to work. It's that they just haven't been hired. So like there's no reason to see the later groups as being less desirable, as so often talked about in these commentaries, but rather there's some other reason why they weren't there that isn't necessarily explicit in the text. So all the allegorical readings that see this as the later groups being less desirable to some extent to some people should probably be dismissed.
Yeah. Seems a little discriminatory to make that assertion.
Yeah,
Okay,
perfect.
so he has now collected all of his laborers,
Yeah.
and the 5 o'clock people work 1 hour, and it's
Mhm.
time to get paid. And he gives everyone the same amount.
Right. Here
And
here
when mm,
here he's the householder is referred to as the Lord of the Vineyard.
mm,
And this is, what's the language? When the evening came, the owner of the vineyard. I don't like that translation. The word here, Kyrios, that's a Greek word. That one's like basic enough Greek that like we should all know Kyrios, Lord. Um, householder, no, is that
nope.
not like a common Greek word? No, okay. Um, but he's like referred to as the Lord of the Vineyard, which is hinting at identification between the householder and the God divine.
Okay.
Uh, but it doesn't mean it's only a reference to God. Again, this can be seen as multiple things. Um, so yeah, it's probably good now. Now with all the hints that we have, it's probably good to see this both as the householder being, a divine figure of some sort, not like a literal divine figure per se, but representing the divine to some extent, and also representing his position in genuine society as they are as the parable exists.
Okay.
Uh, Seeing kind of how both work, but um, traditionally the reading of Lord takes us to represent the divine, and the groups are different, or the people are different groups of people, uh, and it addresses resentment felt by those who've like followed the Torah for their whole lives and years and years and years, and then when the newly welcomed in Gentiles come in, the you know, Torah observing Jews are disgruntled and upset. And the commentary that often comes here is that the bearing the burden of the day and the scorching heat is referring to the following the Torah and law like that. And if you hear that, you can automatically know that this isn't what the first century Jewish audience heard. This is a much later interpretation. Following the Torah was not seen as this, burdensome thing that you had to do. So again, we're just talking about problematic passages here, but we're fine.
It's great. It's phenomenal to hear how things are interpreted.
Yeah. So, but if it's not a representative of the divine, a more modern image of what's going on here would kind of make sense that the householder is kind of taking from the poor to give to the poor, and that's another critique of how this could be seen. Um, and we're supposed to sympathize with the first hired, that that like, hey, the first hired did a lot more work, they should get paid more, and that's another way that people have seen this. And then a lot of like feminist readings could look at it this way, comparing like women factory workers who get paid much less than men factory workers, and it kind of looking at that aspect of it, like, oh my goodness, why is this pay discrepancy here?
Don't
So
even get me started.
again, these are different ways that people have looked at this.
Don't even get me started. Because first it was men in the factories, then it was women, then it was children.
Yeah.
The pay discrepancies was awful. Okay.
Um,
So they're disgruntled.
but yeah, and then the comments that this is anti-union work by the householder doesn't seem to necessarily stand up. Um,
They didn't have unions.
they didn't have. I mean, that is an anachronistic um, naming of it for sure. So they didn't have unions, but they did have union type systems where like rabbinic literature acknowledges guilds or voluntary groups
Yeah.
where they like work together to like set up systems that worked.
Yeah.
So like while there weren't official unions, there were people that like worked together in that sense for
I
sure.
understand guilds. I've read a fantasy book or two.
Are guilds common in fantasy
Oh,
works?
Assassin's Guilds? Yes.
I know guilds. My familiarity with guilds is with artists from Renaissance artists. They're
Yep.
often in guilds and groups. So we get our guilds from different sources, and that's okay.
That's okay. But no, guild I can get down with. Union, I'm like, I was in a union. They didn't have unions. A guild? Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, so I just have to use a different word for yeah, okay.
No, you're fine.
I need to read more like fantasy novels and stuff like that, and then we can all speak the same language.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, we're getting there. All right. So he says that this is, I can do what I want with my stuff, is basically the landowner's response. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, before that, we're
Oh,
we're not quite there. Slow down, Jody. We're talking
sorry.
we're talking through this slowly. We're talking, piece by piece. Oh,
Meandering.
but other midrashic literature kind of has stories similar to this, and it often has God kind of like questioning like how we think things get done. And like wage labor is swapped with piecework, or rather, laborers are compensated based on quantity, not time. And that's like the solution to similar things like this. Um, where we're like here, it's very similar. Workers are looking for what's fair, and the householder is kind of teaching them a lesson by like showing what's right. Like they're looking for what's fair. We did a lot more work, but the householder's like, but I want to give everyone equal and stuff like that. So that
Yeah.
seems to be more so what's going on here.
Okay.
But most importantly, the takeaway from this kind of complaint that they have, because that's a section we're talking about, the complaint that they have
Yeah.
is that the first hired don't want to be treated equally to the last. They want to be treated better.
Mm.
And it's the commentators that look at this that provide the last people with the negative characteristics. And I think that's one of the main takeaways we should look at this. It's not that the first wanted to be treated equally to the last, it's that they wanted to be treated better. And I think that's a fascinating insight and should be kind of, thought of here.
Well, the first people to anything want to be gatekeepers and want to
Sure.
be the have a feather in their cap because we were here first.
Yeah.
It's like when you find a new artist, you're like, but I liked them when they were nobody.
Mm.
I worked in your vineyard before any of these other people came here. Appreciate me more, darn it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
I've been following God for longer than any of you have been following God, so I know God better than you. Yeah,
Okay.
that's the allegorical reading here. That's, perhaps mistaken.
But I thought we were supposed to welcome everyone.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, and now we can move on to kind of the closing,
Got it.
um, where the householder gets the last word and kind of condemns the grumbling workers.
Well, yeah, because, how dare you ask for more of my things? I give what I give. It's mine.
Sure. Um, but yeah, I think there's interesting things happening here. First of all, he refers to them as friend. And Matthew uses the friend three times in his book. Um, and each time it's kind of ironically. The first time it's at a wedding banquet where the king is like asking like how people got in, and then the second time, or maybe third time, it's talking about Judas betraying Jesus, where Jesus calls Judas friend. So like Matthew's connecting these grumpy first hired people with these people who were punished and betrayed, or yeah, yeah. So
Okay.
it's interesting that these are all kind of called friend, ironically, but like the house the householder also kind of has a point. The first hired weren't treated unfairly, but they agreed for the rate.
Yep.
Like they said, hey, we'll work for a denarius, and the householder said, cool, cool, cool things, we'll do it. And it's only until later that they're upset, where they get what they agreed to, but when
Mm,
they see that other people also get what they agreed to, it's not the same anymore. It's not,
no.
it's not good. Oh no, we can't do it. Ah.
Like you were made a promise, the promise was fulfilled. Some people came later. I told them I'd give them what was right. I decided to give them equal what you got, but you're the one who first agreed. Like they came in with ambiguity.
Mhm.
Like everyone else came in ambiguous on what exactly they'd be receiving.
Yeah,
Only the first people had the guarantee.
yeah. The later people were promised they'd be treated fairly, whatever that means to a landowner.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, and then the last line of this whole thing, the last will be first and the first will be last, is likely not original to the story, is likely kind of inserted in because it kind of contradicts the whole parable.
Yeah.
Because like the notice of equal pay and the complainers that have all been like made equal are all upset. Like this isn't about like the last being first and the first being last. This is about equality of some sort.
Yeah.
Um, like the only instance here of the last being first, like the order in which they're paid. The people who
Mhm.
got their last were paid first. So like that's kind of why it was imported here probably, but like this can't be really seen as the moral of the parable. Like if you want to moralize this, saying like the last will be first, the first will be last, isn't a good moralization because it
It
doesn't really
doesn't make sense.
right. Correct.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Like I think reading that last night, I was like, okay, so the last will be first and the first. First of all, that only makes sense to me when I'm reordering food for FIFO, first in, first out.
Yeah.
Um, no, that's crazy. Okay. So what do
But
we
yeah.
do with that?
Right. So I think looking at this economically is probably the best way we can look at this story. Um, this parable. That's probably the most helpful way to understand what Jesus was intending. It's on the one hand, like the householder is kind of analogous to God in the sense that the householder figure should be a model to the followers of Jesus, to the rich followers of Jesus, not as like, hey, landowners and rich people are holy, as I'm sure some people would love to say, but rather as a warning that they should act as God does. Um, like this should be a message of overwhelming grace and mercy and caring for those who labor. Um,
I can
if
agree with.
right, so like if the resources allow, they should disperse funds so that everyone has food.
Yeah.
It's not, and that's kind of the message that seems to be put forth by Jesus here. Hey, give a denarius to everyone who worked. Like, cool, fair enough.
Mhm.
Um, and but I think this is why it's so often dismissed because these practical implications make it unsafe and dangerous because it requires the rich to be unfetteredly
Generous?
generous, which oh no, can't be generous. So this is Jesus encouraging landowners and the rich to kind of enact the graciousness of God. It yeah, it doesn't really promote egalitarianism in that sense, but it does encourage householders to support all laborers. And it's far more challenging than the hey, this is just about heaven and how us good Christians are going to get in and the Jews won't. That's that's not the challenging message that parables are so famous for, and it's not helpful for anything. Right? But rather, I think Jesus is trying to challenge the more wealthy among them to say, like, hey, help the poor and the laborers that need it.
But yes, God forbid that interpretation be the main
Yeah.
one.
um, I think I think this thing that can get interpreted incorrectly here is for people listening us to us, like if you disagree with that message, this can be easily dismissed as Marxist, or like if you very much agree with this message, you can be dismissed as capitalist or something like that. I don't think saying that Jesus was capitalist or Marxist or whatever other social political theory created in the past 300 years, I don't think that's helpful. I don't think that's beneficial or useful or accurate in any
Don't put
sense.
that on Jesus. Jesus didn't
Right.
ask for that. Jesus wasn't around for that. Not for that nonsense.
Right. Rather, I think seeing Jesus as more of an idealist and pragmatist um, is, more helpful. Jesus more often focuses on the responsibility of the rich than like the good news to the poor. So understanding that being the situation here, I think can be helpful.
Yeah. Because, I mean,
Um,
he just seemed to want people to be taken care of.
yeah,
That's, just leave it at that. Like, so,
but yeah, and then AJ Levine kind of finishes her chapter with the thought
mm,
that like if we look at the message as who gets a daily wage instead of who gets into heaven, we get a message that challenges rather than kind of prompts complacency. And I think that's kind of the point of what Jesus's message is here, and the message that kind of first century Jews would have understood. So, but yeah, not the anti-Semitic message that so many of these parables get turned into for some reason, but rather it's not. I don't think this is the most provocative parable that we've heard that we've talked about. Like the message that we're kind of promoting here is like be generous, help those in need, and stuff like that. So it's not the most outlandish. We've never heard this stuff before, but I think it is still revolutionary in the sense that it hasn't always been interpreted that this way because it's a lot easier to just kind of look at it allegorically and kind of sit back complacently.
well, yeah. And then that way, no one's looking at the capitalist saying, hey, be generous. Jesus said so.
Right. So yeah,
So,
a lot going on here, but you have any other thoughts or anything?
um, no, I think I've turned around my opinion. I think I like this. I didn't like it when I first read it. I was like, I don't like this message. But that was mainly because of the so the last will be first and first will be last.
Right.
And then I apparently my brain completely skipped over for the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh, this is
But
supposed to be
yeah,
about the kingdom of heaven.
and then the first will be last, last will be first. That pops up a bunch of places throughout the Gospels, of various meanings for sure. But we'll talk about that at some point, I'm sure, in the future.
Oh, I'm sure that could be an entire episode. I have so many thoughts in my head about it now.
Yeah.
All righty. Well, thank you for joining us for a parable. And you can find us where, Matthew?
We are on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Bluesky, Amazon Music, Facebook, email, or wherever.
Yeah.
You can find us. The Religious Treehouse. It's great. Like and subscribe. Apparently, that's a thing that is cool. All the cool kids are liking and subscribing. And if you want to
Yes.
be like them, you can like and subscribe. And if you want to be the coolest, comment.
And argue with Matthew.
No,
Not
don't
argue,
argue.
discuss.
Discuss.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Discuss.
You're right. I did have to read a comment where you're like, I'd prefer to discuss, not debate. And I was
Yeah.
like, yeah, that's
Yeah.
about it.
Someone commented, he's like, do you want to debate on this? I'm like, no, we don't
No,
debate. We'll talk. We can chat like
we
old
can chat.
pals. We're like, hey, what's up, friend? This is why you're wrong. I'll still be blunt, but we're not going to debate. But
This is
yeah,
not a
comment,
hostile
like,
environment.
comment, like, subscribe, and tell us how much you hate or like us. I'm good with either.
I'm not. You better like me. Have a great day.
All right. Bye, all.
Bye. I didn't rage at the capitalists, but I will.
There's always time to rage at the capitalists.
We need to do the eye of the needle one.
Oh, yeah.
Taking a camel through the eye of the needle.
Yeah.